Iowa football gets their guy. Five-star defensive lineman Iose Epenesa has committed to the Hawkeyes. We talk about the impact to that. And should the Hawkeyes play a two-quarterback system in game one of the season? A busy Friday Locked On Hawkeye.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you find podcasts. You can also watch us on YouTube. While you're there, hit that subscribe button. Helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. The playoffs have wrapped up. The Olympics are over. The sports just stopped sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We open things up with the big news from yesterday. Five-star defensive lineman Iose Epenesa has committed to the Iowa Hawkeyes. Now, this is a commitment. There is no signing that has happened. That has to wait until December. But as he gets ready for his final season on the football field down in Edwardsville, Illinois, this is a huge coup. You know, you look at the recruitment of Epenesa this season. And, of course, his brother AJ, his dad Epi, those guys, former Hawkeyes. His brother is a walk-on, Eric, right now with the football program. Iose, though, is going through things much differently than AJ. And though AJ, we're not talking about a brother that's decades older or anything like that, the environment that Iose has gone through is just completely different than what AJ had to go through. And the biggest impact of that is obviously NIL and the financial component that goes along with it. As we said in the past, the Iowa football program and Iowa athletics as a whole, as it pertains to the Swarm Collective and the NIL game, look, they're not last. They're certainly not first. They're somewhere in the middle. They're comfortable, but in order to compete with the highest level, still a lot more work needs to be done in that. But we're not talking about a program that is going to be decimated year in and year out by programs coming in and being able to pluck away their top talent. Now, when it comes to high school recruiting, we're talking about a different element. And some of the finalists that were involved for Iose Epenesa, you start with Utah. A lot of connections with his background, a lot of Polynesian players that are on that program, maybe a more comfortable environment just with his background. That was a component there. Also, some coaches that did a lot of good work and had some background with the family. Then Miami, the financial component was huge there. The financial component with what Miami was able to deliver and what they could do with the financial package is unlike anything out of his finalists that were there. Eventually, though, home won out. And the other one that we hadn't talked a ton about, but it sounded like listening to Tom Caker from Hawkeye Report, he had mentioned that Iose Epenesa sounded like it was down to Penn State and Iowa. Eventually chose the Hawkeyes. This is a big coup. I mean, you look at, obviously, the recruiting list, and it goes deeper than just the programs that we mentioned. Penn State, Utah, Miami, Missouri was up there towards the end. But this is a guy that had offers from Arkansas, Auburn, Colorado, Illinois, Iowa State, Kansas, Kentucky, Michigan, Michigan State, Minnesota, Nebraska, Ole Miss, Oregon, Tennessee, Texas, USC, Washington. I mean, when you're talking about that kind of offer list, and how many more would have there been maybe if he didn't have the family connections that he did to Iowa? Were there some programs out there that just decided, look, we know it's not worth the investment because they believe ultimately that he was going to do what he did, and that is commit to the Iowa Hawkeyes. Now, he is a bigger player, certainly than AJ was at this time. You look at the recruiting profiles. Now, Iose is probably a good 30, 40 pounds bigger than AJ was going into his senior year of high school. We know what a stud AJ was coming in right away, what he was able to do and be an impact player right away. Now, you wonder eventually, is Iose Epenesa going to be a guy that plays inside defensive tackle? Look, if he continues to add more weight and goes from 270 pounds now and gets up to that 300-pound range, yes, he's going to be moving inside. He's going to be a defensive tackle in the Iowa scheme. Or are they going to be working to keep him on the outside? Is that something that they're going to be able to do with the power and the quickness that he has and go that route? Listed at 6'4", 270 pounds already at 24/7. 24/7 Sports, in fact, has him rated as the 16th player in the country. Number 16 overall, number 3 defensive lineman, and the number 1 interior defensive lineman in the country. The composite ranking, which puts all the recruiting rankings together out there 42nd in the country, the 5th defensive lineman, and still the number 1 interior defensive lineman. I mean, absolutely huge what Iowa was able to do and what they were able to deliver, bringing in Iose Epenesa now and really adding to this class. You look at the rankings and the way that things have jumped up now for Iowa after getting the commit from Iose Epenesa, really moves them up in the rankings, and something that you definitely want to see what they have in this class, a class that now will have their headliner in Epenesa. They have got the commitment already from a couple other top-level prospects. We talked a lot about Thomas Meyer, the tight end from Clear Lake, another 4-star at Rivals, 4-star at 24/7. Lucas Allgaier, who I'm really excited about him, the offensive tackle from St. Louis. Now, people still wonder what his position is going to be. If it is offensive tackle, let's make that happen. Let's get back to having a great tackle. Some of the other headliners there, Joey Van Wetsinga, his older brother, a walk-on with the football team, playing at the fullback spot. Jimmy Sullivan, the quarterback in this class. Mason Woods, we've talked about him. Really an interesting classes that are all kind of put together and the way that they're going to look coming up this season. And with that, we will dig deeper into things. Mentioned a couple of the different recruiting sites out there and the way that they look at the Iowa Hawkeyes this season. Up to 37th now in the country with the Iose Epenesa, with his connection. 11th in the Big Ten. That one was a little bit interesting to me, but excited about this group, excited about getting the commitment. Certainly big news in the world of Iowa Hawkeyes. Well, that is a look towards the future and Iose Epenesa in the class of 2025. We look at the present. What's happening with Iowa football currently as we get ready for the season? The big story over the weekend was quarterback play. And now a question. Should Iowa go with a 2-quarterback system to open up the season? Illinois State is the opener. They're ranked 20th at the FCS level. This isn't a pushover by any means. What should Iowa do at quarterback in game number 1? We'll talk about that as we continue. Plus, a little basketball news. The non-conference schedules are set for both men's and women's basketball. We'll get into that as we continue. This is Locked On Hawkeyes. Today's episode of the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel, a great sports book if you're looking for the football season, and I know I am. Look, sports have slowed down. We don't have the Olympics anymore. The playoffs have finished up. We're getting to football season, but the games, they just aren't sporting like we want them to. FanDuel, though, they let me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. I took a flyer. I took a deep flyer, and I put a parlay together. I had the Eagles to win the NFC. Boom. All right. I kind of like the Eagles this year. Took that one. I put the Braves. The Braves are spinning their wheels, putting it together. Put that together. And what else? I put one more in there. Oh, Georgia to win the college football playoff. Huge odds. And you can do those things. That's what you're dreaming up when you're playing around at FanDuel. Right now, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. Throughout the course of the summer, a boost or a bonus daily for all customers. That's right. New and existing customers will get that. Something for everyone every day, all summer long over at FanDuel. Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Trent Condon back with you once again on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. For your second listen, how about you check out the Locked On College Football Podcast? Spencer McLaughlin does a great job over there getting you ready for the upcoming season and always what's happening inside the world of college athletics. It's always something different, from conference realignment, the transfer portal, NIL, the new college football expanded playoffs. How pumped up are we for that? The potential for the Hawkeyes to be part of that 12-team mix and a whole lot more. Locked On College Football is available on YouTube and wherever you get podcasts. All part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, let's continue here, Locked On Hawkeyes, and let's get into quarterbacks. Yes, it's going to be a conversation that is going to dominate here over the next couple of weeks. We are going to hear next week from Kirk Ferentz. I think that'll be incredibly important and really seeing how things go. You look at this roster, up and down. I think there are answers to all the questions. Offensive line looks improved. Continuity coupled with returning experience. You're talking about over 150 career starts coming back at that offensive line. The running back stables as deep as Iowa's had in an incredibly long time. And you're talking about not just dudes, but high impact players that have done it at the Big Ten level. Wide receiver, okay, yes, there's questions there. Excited and intrigued to see what some of the young guys can do. Continue to hear great things about Jacob Gill, the Northwestern transfer, and what he's been able to do. I think we all believe that Caleb Brown is going to be at minimum solid. Can they get anything out of Seth Anderson? Is it going to be one of the freshmen coming in? Could Vanderzee come in, the big 6'4" kid from Northwest Iowa, come in and be a player that at least makes some helps out in his freshman campaign? Tight end is loaded. Defensively, love the starting four of the defense. 2 All-American linebackers, a deep and talented secondary. Punter looks to be in good shape with Reese Dakin taking over, and Drew Stevens appears to be back. All those things appear really, really good. And then you get to the most important position in all of sport, the quarterback position. What is happening there? So good news, as we talked about earlier this week on Locked On Hawkeyes. From what we have heard, Cade McNamara had a bounce back. Had a bounce back after that pitiful performance at the open practice at Kids Day on Saturday at Kinnick Stadium. He bounced back and has been practicing much better. The other component, though, as Brendan Sullivan has been taking reps with the one. Maybe it's the push that he needed. Maybe it was an eye-opening experience for Cade McNamara, knowing, yes, you're healthy. Yes, you feel good. You saw those scrambles. He looked quick. He looked athletic. Definitely want to see that part of it. But knowing, I got to go. The time is now. And knowing just how Cade is wired, right? We know this guy. He is incredibly confident. Some would say cocky. He has what you're looking for, though, at that position. He believes, and more importantly, maybe than that, he gets other players to believe. That's what you want at the quarterback position, that guy that's a leader of men, and you have that with Cade McNamara. But he also has to show it. And players very quickly will realize if he doesn't have it and there's a different option, they're going to be ready for that different option too. That's what Cade McNamara has to see and what he has to show. But the question is with this. Now, I don't believe, as I mentioned right after practice on Saturday, Kirk Ferentz is going to go with Cade McNamara. From what we know of Kirk Ferentz's background and the way that he looks at the quarterback position, it would be a huge upset if we did not see him be the guy that is the quarterback to start the ball game. The other component that you do wonder about is you bring in Brendan Sullivan. Look, he knew he was going to have probably an opportunity to compete, but he also knew it was going to be incredibly uphill climb for him to be the starter in game number 1. He still made the choice to come to Iowa, even knowing that he's been a backup before. He's gone through this before. And after what we heard with Cade McNamara and the way things went for him at Michigan when J.J. McCarthy eventually unseated him, it wasn't great. Let's put it that way. It was not a great situation. People inside the Michigan program will tell you just that. Was it handled great on either side? Probably not. I think there's blame that could definitely be pointed at both sides. But that aside, it's not Cade McNamara. That's not where he came from. And you do wonder if we go out there in game 1, Brendan Sullivan would get the start. If you go that direction, can you get Cade McNamara back? Not just on the field. I think he would still stick around. But mentally, can you get him back? That's something that you have to do. If Brendan Sullivan right now is a touch better, is it worth upsetting the apple cart for that? Because it's not just about one guy is a C plus and the other one's a straight C. It's not that. Or maybe from what we saw Saturday, one's a D plus and the other one's a D. It's not that. There's so many other components here. And as we talk about the leadership qualities, which is uber important to Kirk Ferentz, there's just so many layers to this story that doesn't make it just as simple as trotting the guy out there that you like most, that you think is a tick better and going that route. And certainly at the quarterback position, that makes it a whole lot different. So here's the question. I don't want to see them go the direction that they did in the bowl game a couple of years back. Hey, one quarterback gets the start, then we're going to alternate series. If you score a touchdown, you lead your team on a touchdown drive, you get to stay out there. If not, then the other guy goes in. I don't like that. And certainly for this situation, some aspects, maybe that could work. Don't like it for what we have at this spot. Here's another way, though, that you could go. And potentially just knowing this. We are going to play Brendan Sullivan. And let it be known right at the beginning. We don't know when. It might be the 3rd series. It might be the 5th series. But at some point, maybe you can even say in the 3rd quarter, he's going to be in there at minimum and he's going to be ready to go. Do you go that route and make sure that you at least get some game reps in this new system for your backup quarterback and Brendan Sullivan? Look, even if I was clinging to a 20-10 lead against Illinois State, hey, we still got to go that direction, knowing what awaits them, what is in front of them with the Iowa State game in week number 2, what awaits them when we get to weeks 4 and 5 as they take on Minnesota on the road. It'll be the first road environment for the Hawkeyes at the beginning of the season. And then, of course, after that, Ohio State and how big that has a chance to be that matchup there. So it's just a question. It's just an idea. I think it's difficult though. I really do for Kirk Ferentz to go into this. And the other component we'll hear from Kirk Ferentz is, where does Tim Lester, how much equity does he have in the Ferentz Bank, right? How much has he put in? And I don't want to say respect because that's not the right term, but how much has he built up in order where Tim Lester comes and says, look, we have to go in order for this to work, in order for this offense to click at the way that we want it to here, even in season number 1, when we don't have the full complement of plays, we're not completely into the new system. Even with that, Tim Lester, if he says, I believe that Brendan Sullivan needs to be the guy from the get-go, is Kirk Ferentz willing to listen? That's a question we don't know the answer to. And quarterback, we've talked about it in the past. This is always a difficult and tricky spot for Kirk Ferentz, a wild one there. Speaking of the Iowa offense, how about this? A prop has come out from Circus Sports, available here in the state of Iowa, where you can bet if the Iowa Hawkeyes get to 25 points per game. Of course, a season ago, it was an off-season topic that dominated the conversation. Brian Ferentz and the what am I looking for? The wording in the contract. There it is. The wording in the contract that he had to average 25 points per game or he was going to be unemployed. Now, there was some wiggle room certainly there, but overall, it was just something as simple as Gary Barta. One of the final things that he did as the Iowa athletic director is, we're going to go this direction. We're going to put this caveat in there into the contract and see exactly what this is going to look like. See if Iowa is going to be able to average 25 points per game. It was a benchmark that statistically was shown that Iowa is very good. When they put up that kind of total, when they put up that kind of points per game, just how successful Iowa has been. There was nothing about yardage, anything like that. Now, it completely fell apart. The injuries, Luke Lachey going down, Cade McNamara going down, Eric Gall going down, the banged up offensive line. Look, it never happened, and it never was going to happen for that team. We saw Deacon Hill. That team, I mean, you could give them 8 quarters a game. They weren't getting to 25 points per game the way that they were built a season ago. But to have that number out there again this year, and, we've talked about baselines. What do you consider an improvement? Yesterday, or Wednesday maybe it was, I brought up Greg Davis and some similarities in year number 1, perhaps, of how it went with Greg Davis taking over the Iowa offense when he took over in 2014. I mentioned, they only average 310 yards per game. And one of the commenters over in YouTube, he mentioned, I would love 310 yards a game after what we've seen the last 2 seasons. I mean, that'd be an improvement from last year, like 70 yards per game. We've been beaten down. We got a little battered syndrome that's happening here as football fans of what we've seen in this case. And I understand that one. Yeah, 310 after last season, that sounds great. We're not talking about a high level. 25 points per game. Remember, this is not just offensively, though. This is everything. Another component that we've talked about, and something that I think is going to be incredibly important, is they can get this offense up to a competent level, is I think you're going to see that help out the Iowa defense. Not just keeping them off the field, giving them more rest. The amount of plays that Iowa had to play a season ago defensively was just absolutely ridiculous, yet still maintaining that elite level that they did a season ago. But also, the other element that I've talked about with you guys in the past is just this. Offenses, you saw it, I thought, to a completely different level a year ago. Offenses last season knew we didn't have to be aggressive. We can sit back. We know the Iowa defense is great, but we know the offense is so bad for the Hawkeyes that we don't have to take chances. We don't need to take shots down the field. We don't have to be uber aggressive because, you know what? If we go 3 and out, or if the drive stalls at the 50-yard line, we'll just put him back to him because that offense is so inept. It's just so neutered that there's nothing that's going to be able to happen that we're concerned about. Well, if you get an offense that's just a little bit better, teams have to be a little bit more aggressive. And we know if you're aggressive against a Phil Parker defense, and certainly the defense that it looks like he's going to have this season, that's when sacks start to happen. That's when turnovers start to happen. That's when defensive scores start to happen. You get that? Now we're cooking. Now we're looking good. Wrapping up here, a little more football talk on Locked On Hawkeyes. Plus, we got some basketball for you as well. The non-conference schedule is out for the men's basketball team. We'll talk about that as we continue. This is Locked On Hawkeyes. Today's episode of Locked On Hawkeyes is brought to you by the Gametime app. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball. It makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets for first pitch. Killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat. and their lowest price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. Not just MLB tickets, they got you covered on a bunch of different things, including the Iowa Hawkeyes coming up this season at Kinnick Stadium, all the road games. They got you covered for football, college football, NFL, and a whole lot more. All-in pricing, my favorite component of the Gametime app, toggling the all-in pricing feature shows you the total up front. You don't have to worry about what those fees are going to be at checkout. You know what your total is going to be before you go to that checkout page. Plus, get views from your seats. A view from your seat in the app. See exactly where you're going to be inside the stadium before you buy. And Gametime's ticket coverage, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticking industry, all with Gametime. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets and all tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and make sure you use the code It's Locked On College. That'll get you $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On College, LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Trent Condon back with you one final time here on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. All right, let's continue here. Locked On Hawkeyes, big news. Iose Epenesa has made his commitment. We've talked about quarterback play a little bit, 25 points per game. Will Iowa get there? Again, that prop up is over at Circa Sports. We wrap things up here with some basketball and a little more on the football front. Let's start first with the non-conference basketball schedule has been set for the Iowa program. And it's a non-conference schedule that doesn't exactly wow you. There is no big exempt tournament. That's one component to this one. I think that is interesting. Iowa not playing an exempt tournament, going to Maui, anything like that. That will not be happening this year. However, the Hawkeyes will be playing 3 non-conference games on neutral floors. Coming up on November 15th, they'll return to the Quad Cities and be playing at the old Mark in Moline against Washington State. Washington State, an NCAA tournament from a year ago, made the round of 32. They got some pieces that'll be missing next season, but Wazoo will be the opponent in that one. Also, a week later, on the 22nd of November, I will be heading down to Kansas City as they'll take on Utah State. Utah State, another tournament team from a year ago. And then finally, they'll take on Utah. That one will be out in Sioux Falls. So really, all over the place. You'll get an opportunity to see the Hawkeyes. And for somebody here in Des Moines, I'm kind of thinking of all those. Well, I think we can make all of those work, right? That could be something different. I think you're going to see great environments. I know when I was played in Sioux Falls in the past, what great crowds there's been for that one. I was there for the first ever matchup there covering the game. Really enjoyed it. My wife's from Sioux City, so we drove up there. She and the kids, they decided to stay at Grandma's place, and Dad went up to a basketball game. So yeah, I'm looking, can we make that one work? Well, Kansas City, I mean, that's less than 3 hours. I can get down there for that one. And the Quad Cities, I think, is going to be a great environment. And for the first time in almost 20 years, they'll be back there. Now, your other matchups include Texas A&M Commerce. They were 333rd last year in the net. These numbers from Scott Dockerman of The Athletic. Southern, 257th in the net a year ago. South Dakota, the Coyotes, 322. Ride or die. 220, they'll come to Carver Hawkeye Arena. USC Upstate, South Carolina Upstate, they were 303rd. How about New Orleans? No, not the Pelicans. Be the Privateers. 340th last year in the country. And finally, New Hampshire, 230th. They'll come to Carver right before New Year's. That is your non-conference slate, along with the matchup against Iowa State. Look, with the team with some new faces, some new pieces, I am more optimistic about this basketball team, I think, than a lot of people. We've heard some good things throughout the course of this summer. The newcomers are incredibly intriguing. I believe they're going to be a bubble team, and this year on the right side of the bubble. Look, going into last season, I didn't think they were going to be sniffing the bubble. I looked at the components, the roster makeup of that squad, and I thought they were going to be absolutely brutal. Not the case, and we saw them going into that final game against Illinois and into the Big Ten tournament. They still had a path to get into the NCAA tournament and a realistic path. Now, they had to win a couple more games, but to do that with that roster, I thought was one of Fran McCaffrey's better coaching jobs of getting them. They're going to be better this year. And a slate in the non-conference where I think they can stack up wins. It's not crazy to think that the Hawkeyes will be undefeated through November as they face off against Iowa State, a preseason top 5 Iowa State team that'll be coming into Carver on December 12th. You're talking about, at that point, 4, 5, 6, 7-0. Now, even at 7-0, I don't know if they'll be sniffing the top 25 for many people because of the teams that they'll be playing. Still, that is going to be something to keep an eye on there. And then remember also the home and homes in the Big Ten with the new 18-team Big Ten this year. They'll play Nebraska, Northwestern, and Wisconsin. Those are their double plays and then single plays this season. At home only games against Indiana, who should be pretty good. Michigan State, who should be pretty good. Minnesota, Oregon, Penn State, Purdue, and Washington. Those are the teams that'll be making their way into Carver Hawkeye Arena. Then road-only tilts against Illinois. Tough. At Maryland, never an easy place to play. At Michigan, they think they're going to be good. At Ohio State, same with the Buckeyes. At Rutgers, who brings in the best class in the country. Yes, Rutgers. UCLA, who should be really good. And USC. Those are your road trips coming up this season for Iowa basketball. Let's jump over to women's basketball for you as they are set with their schedule coming up this year. They'll open things up against Northern Illinois. The Huskies come to town, the home opener on November 6th, followed up by a neutral court game against Vatech. That game a year ago that they played, absolutely incredible, and a return trip out there as the Hawkeyes will receive $150,000 for that one. They also will be going to Sioux Falls. They'll take on Kansas. That one coming up on November 20th for the matchup there. And then the matchup in the it's not the Champions Classic, but the big time matchup that they set in at Brooklyn at the Barclays Center against Tennessee, obviously one of the power programs in the country. They'll be heading down to Cancun this year for a 2-team exempt tournament. They'll take on Rhode Island and BYU down in that one. Washington State's there. Of course, the Iowa State game this year again in Carver. UNI, that'll be happening on December 20th. This schedule is incredibly difficult, and it should be. Yes, Caitlin Clark will not be there. We'll miss Kate Martin and Gabby, but this team, with Ava Hayden coming in, with Lucy Olsen coming over to take over the point guard, this team, I think at minimum, is going to be a tournament team. I think they have a chance to be even better than that. They're going to look different. They're going to do things different, but you're number one for Jan Jensen. I think she put together a very good non-conference schedule, an opportunity for this Iowa team to get a lot of quality wins. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We got Tom Kakert coming up, a little bonus weekend edition for you. Conversation with Tom Kakert from HawkeyeReport.com and a whole lot more as we get ready for it. Next week, it's our final week before Iowa football begins. Week 0 games a week from Saturday. Ooh, so excited to get college football back in there. We still have to make our official season preview. We have to go through each and all the components, a few other things that we have not touched on here leading up to football season. Can't wait. Thanks for joining us here, Locked On Hawkeyes. Before you go, want to thank you and also remind you to go check out the Locked On College Football Podcast. From NIL deals to the never-ending conference realignment rumors, Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for the upcoming season on the gridiron. You can find the link to Locked On College Football in the description, so you don't even need to search. All part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We got you covered on the Hawkeye front. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you again over the weekend with Tom Kakert, and go Hawks.